The rope binding Eliza O'Malley's wrists chafed her skin raw as her brother Silas dragged her through the dusty main street of Silver Creek, Montana Territory, 1875. Every eye in town watched the spectacle. A young woman of 20, her blue calico dress torn and mudded, being pulled like livestock toward the trading post where men gathered to barter goods, services, and occasionally human lives. "Silas, please," Eliza begged, her voice cracking as she stumbled over a rut in the dirt road. "Don't do this. I'm your sister." Silas O'Malley, a man consumed by gambling debts and whiskey, didn't even turn to look at her. "Ain't got no choice, Lisa. Either you go or we both end up dead. Jackson's men will collect what I owe one way or another." The trading post loomed ahead, its weathered facade casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. Eliza could hear the murmur of men's voices growing louder as Silas pulled her up the steps. Her heart hammered in her chest, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. Since their parents had died 2 years ago, Silas had squandered their farm and everything they owned. Now, he had nothing left to sell but her. Inside, the room fell silent as Silas shoved her forward. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of unwashed bodies. A dozen men turned to stare, some with pity in their eyes, others with something far worse. "Got a healthy woman here," Silas announced, his voice unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "My sister, 20 years old. Can cook, clean, so good breeding stock." He spoke as if describing a mare, not the sister he'd once sworn to protect. Eliza kept her eyes on the rough-hewn floorboards, shame burning through her. How had it come to this? She'd done everything to save their farm after their parents died, worked from dawn till dusk, taken in mending, even sold her mother's jewelry. But Silas's gambling had been a bottomless pit. "What's the starting price?" asked a gruff voice from the back of the room. $300, Silas replied. "She's worth twice that." A few men laughed. Another called out a bid of $50. Eliza's knees threatened to buckle beneath her. "100, came another voice. "150, called a third. "300. The new voice cut through the bidding like a knife. The room fell silent again as a tall figure moved through the crowd. Eliza lifted her gaze slightly, enough to see dusty leather boots and denim-clad legs approaching. "300, the man repeated, his voice deep and steady. "Paid in full right now." Silas's grip on her arm tightened. "Now wait a minute, bidding just started." "300 was your asking price," the man countered. "I'm meeting it, unless you're not a man of your word." Eliza raised her eyes further, taking in the stranger who was bidding for her life. He stood over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered in a faded blue shirt, a leather vest, and a weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. A gun belt hung at his hip, the holster worn from use. His face was tanned from the sun, partly hidden by several days' worth of beard, but his eyes, striking blue eyes, were clear and focused entirely on Silas. "Who are you?" Silas demanded. "Lucas Quinn. Got a ranch south of here." He reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather pouch. 300. "Count it if you want." Before Silas could respond, Quinn tossed the pouch onto a nearby table. The clink of gold coins hitting wood silenced whatever protest her brother might have made. Silas hesitated only a moment before snatching up the pouch. He counted the money quickly, greed overtaking any brotherly feeling he might have once possessed. With a satisfied grunt, he pushed Eliza toward Quinn. "She's yours, then. Do what you want with her." Eliza stumbled forward, barely catching herself before colliding with the stranger's chest. Lucas Quinn steadied her with a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder, then reached down and pulled a knife from his boot. For one terrifying moment, Eliza thought he meant to harm her right there, but instead, he cut the ropes binding her wrists. "Come on," he said quietly, guiding her toward the door. "Wait," Silas called after them. "No refunds, Quinn. Whatever state you find her in, that's your problem now." Quinn turned slowly, his hand still resting lightly on Eliza's back. The look he gave Silas made the smaller man take a step backward. "If I were you, O'Malley," Quinn said, his voice dangerously low, "I'd be on a stage out of town before sundown. Because if I see your face again, you'll wish I hadn't." Without waiting for a response, he guided Eliza out of the trading post and into the fading daylight. She followed numbly, her mind still struggling to process what had happened. This man had just purchased her, owned her. What did he intend to do with her? As if reading her thoughts, Quinn stopped when they reached a chestnut mare hitched outside. "I'm not going to hurt you, Miss O'Malley, but we should get out of town before your brother decides $300 isn't enough." "How do you know my name?" Eliza asked, finding her voice at last. "Small town," he replied simply. "Word gets around," he gestured to the horse. "Can you ride?" Eliza nodded. She'd grown up on a farm, riding had been as natural as walking. "Good." He boosted her up into the saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm reaching around to take the reins. "My ranch is about 2 hours' ride from here. We'll talk more when we get there." They rode in silence through town, Eliza acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers that would already be spreading. Lucas Quinn kept a respectful distance between their bodies despite sharing the saddle, but she could feel the solid warmth of him behind her, smell leather and horses, and something else, something clean, like soap. As they left the last buildings of Silver Creek behind, Eliza finally gathered the courage to ask the question burning in her mind. "Mr. Quinn, why did you buy me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice came soft near her ear. "Because nobody deserves to be sold like cattle, Miss O'Malley, especially not by their own blood." It wasn't a complete answer, but it was enough for now. Eliza fell silent again, watching the Montana landscape roll by as they rode toward whatever future this stranger had purchased for her. The sun was setting by the time they crested a ridge overlooking a valley. Below them stretched a modest but well-maintained ranch, a 2-story house built of solid timber, a large barn, corrals containing horses, and cattle grazing in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was there. "Home," Quinn said simply, guiding the horse down the path toward the ranch. As they approached, a middle-aged woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a sensible bun, and she squinted up at them with obvious curiosity. "Lucas, didn't expect you back so soon and with company," she called as Quinn dismounted and helped Eliza down from the horse. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Eliza O'Malley," Quinn said. "She'll be staying with us. Miss O'Malley, this is Mrs. Holloway, my housekeeper." Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows rose slightly as she took in Eliza's disheveled appearance, but her expression remained kind. "Well, miss, you look like you could use a hot meal and a bath. Come on inside." Eliza glanced uncertainly at Quinn, who nodded encouragingly. "Go on. Get settled. I need to see to my horse and check on a few things. We'll talk after you've had a chance to rest." Too exhausted to argue, Eliza followed Mrs. Holloway into the house. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, simple but clean, with solid furniture and a few touches that spoke of care. A patchwork quilt draped over a chair, a vase of wildflowers on the dining table. "The bathroom's through there," Mrs. Holloway said, pointing to a door off the kitchen. "I'll heat water for a bath and find you some clean clothes. Mr. Quinn's sister left some things behind last time she visited, might be a bit large, but better than what you've got on now." "Mrs. Holloway," Eliza began hesitantly, "do you know why Mr. Quinn brought me here?" The older woman paused in her bustling. "No, child," he didn't say, "but Lucas Quinn is a good man. Whatever the reason, you're safe here." She patted Eliza's arm. "Now let's get you cleaned up." An hour later, scrubbed clean and dressed in a borrowed dress that hung a bit loose on her frame, Eliza sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of stew and fresh bread before her. She'd been hungrier than she realized and had nearly finished when Quinn entered the house. He'd cleaned up as well. She noted shaved his beard and changed his clothes. Without the trailed dust and stubble, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with strong features that might have been handsome if not for the scar that ran from his right temple down to his jaw. "Better?" he asked, taking a seat across from her as Mrs. Holloway set another bowl of stew before him. Eliza nodded. "Thank you for the bath and food. Mrs. Holloway makes the best stew in the territory," he said, offering the housekeeper a rare smile before turning serious again. "Miss O'Malley, I imagine you have questions." "Just one, really," she replied. "What do you expect of me? What am I to be here?" Quinn set down his spoon and looked her directly in the eye. "You're not a slave if that's what you're asking. I don't own you. But you paid for me. I paid to get you away from a bad situation." He frowned slightly. "Your brother was selling you to whoever would pay, some of those men in that room. Well, their intentions wouldn't have been honorable." Eliza swallowed hard, knowing he was right. "So what happens now? Now you have choices," Quinn said simply. "You can stay here, work as a housekeeper alongside Mrs. Holloway if you'd like. I could use the help. Or, if you prefer, I can arrange transport to another town where you could start fresh. Maybe Helena or even Denver. I have contacts who could help you find respectable work." Eliza stared at him, confusion and suspicion warring within her. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Something flickered in Quinn's eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory. "Let's just say I've seen enough cruelty in this world to last a lifetime. I had the means to help, so I did." Mrs. Holloway made a small noise that might have been approval as she busied herself at the stove. "You don't have to decide tonight," Quinn continued. "Stay, rest, think about what you want to do. This is a safe place." Eliza studied him, trying to discern his true intentions. Men, in her experience, rarely did anything without expecting something in return, but there was something in Lucas Quinn's direct gaze that made her want to trust him. "I'll stay," she said finally. "At least for now, and I'll earn my keep." Quinn nodded. "Fair enough, Mrs. Holloway will show you to your room." He rose from the table. "I've got some paperwork to attend to. Good night, ladies." After he left, Mrs. Holloway showed Eliza to a small but comfortable bedroom on the second floor. "Mr. Quinn's room is at the end of the hall," she explained. "Mine's downstairs near the kitchen. You'll have your privacy here." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the clean quilt. "Mrs. Holloway, may I ask, how long have you worked for Mr. Quinn?" "Going on 5 years now," the woman replied. "Since he came back from the war and bought this place." "The war? He fought for the Union," Mrs. Holloway nodded. "Cavalry, doesn't talk about it much, but I gather he saw some terrible things. That's where he got the scar." She sighed. "He's a private man, Mr. Quinn, keeps to himself mostly. But he's fair and decent, which is more than can be said for many out here." She patted the bed. "Get some sleep, child. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out the rest." Left alone, Eliza lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. The events of the day swirled in her mind: her brother's ultimate betrayal, the humiliation of being sold, and the unexpected intervention of Lucas Quinn. A man who claimed to want nothing from her but seemed to have given her everything. Safety, shelter, choices. It seemed too good to be true. And in Eliza's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Yet as exhaustion claimed her, she couldn't help but feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains when Eliza woke. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room confusing her sleep-fogged mind. Then the memories of the previous day crashed over her and she sat up quickly. She was in Lucas Quinn's ranch house. Her brother had sold her. She was. What exactly? Not a slave, Quinn had said. A housekeeper, maybe. Or she could leave. He'd given her choices. Eliza rose and dressed in the borrowed clothes, a simple blue skirt and white blouse that hung a bit loose on her frame. She tidied the room, making the bed with precise corners the way her mother had taught her, then made her way downstairs. The house was quiet. Through the kitchen window, she could see Quinn in the corral, working with a young horse. He moved with the confident grace of a man who'd spent his life around animals, his gestures calm and assured as he guided the nervous colt through its paces. "He's always up with the sun," Mrs. Holloway said, coming into the kitchen with an armload of vegetables from the garden. "Says he does his best thinking when the world's still quiet. Can I help you with breakfast?" Eliza offered, eager to make herself useful. "Certainly." Mrs. Holloway handed her an apron. "The men will be hungry when they come in." "Men, Mr. Quinn has 2 ranch hands who help with the cattle and horses. They stay in the bunkhouse out back. Good workers, both of them. Tom's been here almost as long as I have, and young Miguel joined last spring." Eliza helped prepare a hearty breakfast of biscuits, gravy, eggs, and bacon. As they worked, Mrs. Holloway told her more about the ranch, 200 acres, modest by some standards but well situated with good water access. Quinn ran about 100 head of cattle and bred horses on the side, developing a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from as far as Denver. "He's built something fine here," Mrs. Holloway said with obvious pride, "and all on his own with no family backing him." The door opened, and Quinn entered, followed by 2 men, one older with a weathered face and gray streaked beard, the other young with dark hair and eyes. They stopped short at the sight of Eliza. "Miss O'Malley," Quinn said with a nod. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under the curious gazes of the ranch hands. "Tom, Miguel, this is Miss Eliza O'Malley. She'll be staying with us for a while." His tone made it clear that no further explanation would be forthcoming. "Miss O'Malley, meet Tom Bradley and Miguel Ramirez." The men mumbled polite greetings, clearly curious but disciplined enough not to ask questions. They all sat down to breakfast, the conversation flowing naturally around ranch business, a fence that needed mending, a mare about to foal, plans for moving part of the herd to new pasture. Eliza observed Quinn during the meal. He was different, with his men still reserved, but more relaxed, occasionally even smiling at Tom's dry jokes. He spoke to them with respect, listening to their input and discussing decisions rather than simply giving orders. After breakfast, the men returned to their work, and Eliza helped Mrs. Holloway clean up. When they finished, the older woman handed her a basket. "Would you mind gathering eggs from the henhouse? It's just behind the garden. I need to start on the laundry." Eliza took the basket gratefully, glad for the chance to explore the ranch and keep busy. The morning air was crisp, the sun warming the dew-covered grass as she made her way to the small henhouse. She'd just finished collecting the eggs when a shadow fell across the doorway. "Settling in?" Quinn asked, leaning against the frame. Eliza straightened, clutching the basket of eggs. "Yes." "Mrs. Holloway has been very kind," he nodded, studying her face. "Any thoughts on whether you'll stay or move on?" "I haven't decided yet," she admitted. "It's all happened so quickly." "Fair enough." He shifted slightly, seeming almost uncomfortable. "I wanted to let you know I'll be riding into town today. Need to check mail and pick up supplies. Thought you might want to come along, get some things that actually fit." He gestured at her borrowed clothes. Eliza hesitated. The thought of returning to Silver Creek, where everyone had witnessed her humiliation, made her stomach churn. Yet she desperately needed personal items, clothes that fit, a hairbrush, soap of her own. "Will my brother still be there?" she asked quietly. Quinn's expression hardened slightly. "If he's smart, he'll be long gone. But if he's not, he won't trouble you, I promise you that." The quiet certainty in his voice reassured her. "Then yes, I'd like to come, thank you." "We'll leave in an hour," he said, stepping back from the doorway. "And Miss O'Malley, you don't need to be afraid anymore. Not of your brother, not of me, not of anyone on this ranch. You have my word on that." Before she could respond, he walked away, leaving Eliza staring after him with the strange feeling that Lucas Quinn was unlike any man she'd ever met. The ride to Silver Creek was mostly silent. Quinn wasn't much for conversation, it seemed, though he occasionally pointed out landmarks or features of the landscape. They rode separate horses, this time Quinn on his chestnut mare, Eliza on a gentle bay gelding. "You ride well," he commented as they forded a shallow stream. "Grew up on a farm," she explained. "We always had horses, and my father believed girls should know how to ride as well as boys." "Your father sounds like a sensible man." Eliza smiled sadly. "He was. He and my mother died 2 years ago, influenza. Left the farm to Silas and me." Her smile faded. "Silas. Changed after they died. Started drinking, gambling. I tried to keep things going, but—" She trailed off, the pain still too fresh. Quinn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Some men don't know how to face loss. They run from it, find ways to numb themselves. Doesn't excuse what he did to you, though." "No," Eliza agreed quietly. "It doesn't." As they rode into town, Eliza felt eyes turning toward them. Whispers followed in their wake: the woman who'd been sold, the rancher who'd bought her. She kept her chin up, refusing to show shame for a situation that had been none of her making. Quinn seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He hitched their horses outside the general store and held the door for her. "Get whatever you need," he told her. "Clothes, personal items, anything to make you comfortable." Inside, the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Jenkins, approached with a sympathetic smile. "Miss O'Malley, good to see you. Are you well?" "I'm fine, thank you," Eliza replied, touched by the woman's concern. "We have some new dress goods just arrived from back east," Mrs. Jenkins said, leading her toward a display. "And I'd be happy to help you with measurements if you'd like to order anything special." While Eliza selected fabric, ready-made garments, and necessities, Quinn conducted his own business at the counter, collecting mail and ordering supplies for the ranch. She was conscious of his presence across the store, the way he kept her in his sightline even while focusing on his tasks. When she'd finished her selections, he paid without comment, arranging for the larger items to be delivered to the ranch later that week. As they left the store, a commotion further down the street caught their attention. "Looks like trouble at the saloon," Quinn observed, his hand moving instinctively to rest on his holstered pistol. Eliza squinted in the bright sunlight. A small crowd had gathered outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, and raised voices carried on the air. Then she saw him, Silas, visibly drunk even at this hour, arguing loudly with a large man she recognized as Jackson, the loan shark to whom he owed money. "He's still here," she whispered, fear and anger mingling in her voice. Quinn's expression darkened. "Stay with the horses. I'll take care of this." "No," Eliza said, surprising herself with her firmness. "I need to see this. He's still my brother, despite everything." After a moment's hesitation, Quinn nodded. "Stay behind me, then." They approached the gathering crowd just as the argument escalated. Jackson had Silas by the collar, shaking him like a rag doll. You think I don't know a counterfeit when I see one? Jackson roared. Half these coins are fake. You trying to cheat me, O'Malley? Silas, looking pathetic and terrified, protested weakly. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Eliza's blood ran cold. The coins Quinn had given Silas for her, Silas must have tried to use them to pay his debt to Jackson. But if they were counterfeit? She glanced at Quinn, whose face revealed nothing. He stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. Problem here? He asked, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. Jackson turned, still gripping Silas by the collar. Quinn, this isn't your business. When it involves the O'Malleys, it is my business, Quinn replied evenly. Silas's bleary eyes finally focused on Eliza standing behind Quinn. You, he spat. This is your fault. You and your fancy rancher. He lunged toward her, but Jackson held him fast. The money you paid him, Jackson said to Quinn, giving Silas another shake. Half of it's fake. Good fakes, but fake. This worm tried to use it to clear his debts with me. Quinn's expression remained neutral. Is that so? He glanced at Silas. Seems you can't even be honest when someone's trying to help you, O'Malley. Help me, Silas laughed bitterly. You took my sister. I saved your sister, Quinn corrected, his voice hardening. From you. He turned to Jackson. How much does he owe you? Jackson narrowed his eyes. $250 plus interest. And how much did he try to pay with the counterfeit coins? $150. Quinn reached into his vest and pulled out a money clip. He counted out several bills. Here's $200. That covers what he legitimately tried to pay, plus some extra for your trouble. The rest of his debt is his problem. Jackson released Silas, who crumpled to the ground, and took the money with a nod of grudging respect. Always said you were a straight dealer, Quinn. He pocketed the cash. O'Malley, you've got 3 days to come up with the rest, or I'm coming for it my way. As Jackson walked away, Quinn looked down at Silas, who was struggling to his feet. I gave you good money yesterday, O'Malley. Where is it? Silas wouldn't meet his eyes. Lost it. Cards last night. Quinn shook his head in disgust. You sold your sister, lost the money, and tried to pass fake coins. You're a piece of work. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Silas and Eliza could hear. I meant what I said yesterday. Leave town. Start fresh somewhere else. Because if I see you again, or if I ever hear you've come near your sister, you'll regret it. The threat hung in the air, all the more menacing for its quiet delivery. Silas, despite his drunken state, seemed to understand the danger. He stumbled backward, nearly falling again. She's not worth the trouble, Quinn, he slurred. You'll see. Before either of them could respond, he turned and staggered away down the street. Eliza watched him go, a complicated mixture of emotions churning within her: anger, pity, grief for the brother she'd once known and loved. I'm sorry, Quinn said quietly at her side. Eliza blinked back tears. For what? That you had to see that. That he's still your brother no matter what he's done. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Did you know about the counterfeit coins? Quinn's eyes met hers, clear and direct. Some of the money I gave him was fake, yes. I figured a man like your brother would try to skip town with it, maybe pay off some debts first. I wanted to make sure he couldn't get far. You set him up, Eliza realized. I protected you, Quinn corrected. Men like Jackson don't forgive debts. If your brother had managed to pay him off completely with counterfeit money, Jackson would have come looking for him and possibly you once he discovered the fraud. Eliza considered this, finding a certain logic in it. So what happens now? Now, Quinn said, offering her his arm, we finish our business in town and head home. Your brother has a choice to make: leave or face Jackson in 3 days. Either way, you're safe. Home, he'd said. As if the ranch were already her home too. Eliza took his arm, finding comfort in his solid presence as they walked back toward the general store. That evening, after they'd returned to the ranch and had dinner with Mrs. Holloway and the Hands, Eliza sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The day's events had left her emotionally drained, but also strangely at peace. Seeing Sila's had closed a chapter somehow. She still loved the brother she'd grown up with, but the man he'd become was someone she no longer recognized. The door opened behind her, and Quinn emerged, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to her and took a seat in the rocking chair beside her. "Beautiful evening," he observed, sipping his coffee. "Yes," Eliza agreed. "Your land is lovely." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky and the first stars appear. "I've decided to stay," Eliza said finally, "if your offer still stands." Quinn nodded. "It does. I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, sew, garden. I helped run our farm after my parents died. I won't be a burden." "Never thought you would be," he replied. "And the ranch could use a woman's touch. Mrs. Holloway does her best, but she's getting older. Having you here would be a help to her." Eliza turned to look at him, really look at him in the fading light. The scar on his face caught the last rays of the sun, a silver line against his tanned skin. There was a sadness in his eyes, she thought, but also kindness. "Why did you really help me, Mr. Quinn?" she asked softly. "The truth." He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I had a sister once, Hannah, younger than me by 6 years. When the war came, I enlisted, left her with our uncle while I went to fight. He wasn't a good man, though I didn't know it then." His hand tightened around his coffee cup. "When I came home, she was gone. He'd married her off to a man 30 years her senior for a business advantage. By the time I found her, she'd died in childbirth. She was 17. "Oh, Lucas," Eliza breathed, instinctively using his first name. "I'm so sorry." He stared out at the darkening land. "When I saw your brother dragging you into that trading post, all I could think was that I couldn't let it happen again, not if I could stop it." Eliza felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you for telling me." Quinn set his empty cup aside and stood. "It's getting chilly. You should come inside." Eliza rose as well, but before he could turn away, she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "What you did for me buying my freedom, bringing me here, giving me choices, it was a kindness I can never repay, but I want you to know how grateful I am." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. Something passed between them in that moment, understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. "Get some rest, Eliza," he said, his voice gentle. "Tomorrow's a new day." As summer progressed into fall, Eliza found herself settling into life at the Quinn Ranch. Days fell into a comfortable routine: early mornings helping Mrs. Holloway prepare breakfast for the men, tending the vegetable garden, mending clothes, and assisting with whatever tasks needed doing. She learned to make soap using Mrs. Holloway's prized recipe, took over much of the baking, and even began helping Quinn with the ranch ledgers when she mentioned she'd kept the books for her family's farm. Quinn himself remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite, even kind in his quiet way, but he maintained a certain distance. They worked together, often side by side in the garden, or at the big table in the evenings, she with her mending, he with his paperwork, but he rarely spoke of personal matters after that night on the porch. Still, Eliza found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. The way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled at one of Tom's jokes, how gentle his hands could be when working with a nervous horse. The deep concentration on his face when he read one of the books from his small but well-curated library. It was Mrs. Holloway who noticed first. "You've taken a shine to him." the older woman observed one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough side by side. Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "He's been kind to me, I'm grateful." Mrs. Holloway gave her a knowing look. "Gratitude's one thing, child. The way you look at him is another." "I don't," Eliza began, then stopped. There was no point denying it to Mrs. Holloway, who saw everything. "It doesn't matter anyway. He sees me as a responsibility, someone he rescued." "Perhaps at first," Mrs. Holloway allowed, "but the way he looks at you when you're not watching, that's not how a man looks at a responsibility." Eliza's hand stilled in the dough. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Holloway smiled and resumed kneading. "Just that Mr. Quinn has been different since you came. Lighter somehow. He talks more, even laughs occasionally." She shrugged. "I've worked for him 5 years and never saw him look at a woman the way he looks at you." Eliza didn't know how to respond to that, so she focused on her bread making, trying to ignore the flutter of hope in her chest. That evening, a thunderstorm rolled in, bringing much-needed rain but also spectacular lightning that spooked the horses. Quinn and the hands worked to calm the animals, coming in late for dinner soaked to the skin. "Thought we were going to lose that new stallion for a minute there," Tom commented as they ate the stew Eliza and Mrs. Holloway had kept warm for them. "Never seen a horse so scared of thunder." "He'll learn," Quinn said. "Just needs time and patience." After dinner, when the others had retired for the night, Eliza found Quinn in the small study adjoining the living room. He sat by the fire, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring into the flames. "I brought you some tea," she said, setting a cup on the small table beside him. "Mrs. Holloway says it helps prevent chills after being out in the rain." He looked up, surprise evident in his face. "Thank you." Instead of leaving, Eliza sat in the chair opposite him. "The storm's passing. Stars are coming out again." Quinn nodded, taking a sip of the tea. "Good. We need the rain, but not the lightning. Too many dry fields still." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the fire crackle and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. "Lucas," Eliza said finally, using his first name deliberately, "may I ask you something?" He looked up at her use of his given name but didn't correct her. "Of course. Why have you never married? A man with a successful ranch, respected in the community. Surely there have been opportunities." The question clearly caught him off guard. He set down his tea and ran a hand through his still damp hair. "I suppose there have been," he admitted. "Never seemed right, though." "Because of the war?" Eliza asked gently. "Or because of your sister?" His eyes met hers, sharp with surprise. "You're perceptive." "I pay attention," she replied simply. Quinn was quiet for a long moment. "Both, maybe. The war changes a man, makes him question what he deserves." He looked down at his hands. "And after Hannah, I couldn't trust myself to protect anyone I cared about. Seemed better to keep to myself." "Yet you took me in," Eliza pointed out. "You're protecting me. That's different." "Is it?" He looked up at her then, really looked at her, and Eliza felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Maybe not as different as I thought," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and possibilities. Then Quinn cleared his throat and stood. "It's late. We should both get some rest." Eliza rose as well. "Of course. Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Eliza," he replied. And she thought she heard something new in the way he said her name, a softness that hadn't been there before. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Eliza's mind whirled with the implications of their conversation. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Lucas Quinn. The question was, what would she do about it? 2 days later, Lucas announced at breakfast that he needed to ride to a neighboring ranch to look at a bull he was considering purchasing. "I'll be gone overnight," he told Mrs. Holloway. "Should be back by tomorrow evening." Eliza, who had been pouring coffee, looked up in surprise. In the 3 months she'd been at the ranch, Lucas had never stayed away overnight. "You want company?" Tom asked. "Miguel and I could come along, make sure the deal's fair." Lucas shook his head. "No need. The Wilsons are honest folks. Besides, I need you two here. That north fence still needs mending, and we've got to move the herd to the lower pasture before the first frost." After breakfast, Eliza followed Lucas out to the barn where he was saddling his horse. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "You seem, I don't know, distracted this morning." Lucas tightened the cinch on his saddle before answering. "Everything's fine, just business, of course." Eliza hesitated, then said, "Be careful, the weather's turning colder." He paused in his preparations to look at her, something softening in his eyes. "I will. Take care of things here while I'm gone, always," she promised. As she watched him ride away, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them, or was about to. With Lucas gone, the day stretched long before her. Eliza threw herself into her chores with unusual vigor, helping Mrs. Holloway make preserves from the last of the garden's harvest, then assisting Miguel with mending harnesses while Tom worked on the fences. "You're restless today, Mrs. Holloway observed as they worked side by side, slicing apples for drying. "Am I?" Eliza tried to sound casual, but the knowing look Mrs. Holloway gave her said she wasn't fooling anyone. "He'll be back tomorrow," the older woman said simply. Eliza sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you two dance around each other for months now." Mrs. Holloway set down her knife. "Eliza, may I speak plainly?" "Please do." "Mr. Quinn is a good man, but he's carrying wounds deeper than that scar on his face. War does that to a person. So does loss." She picked up her knife again, resuming her slicing. "If you care for him, and I believe you do, you may need to be the one to take the first step. He spent too many years believing he doesn't deserve happiness." Eliza considered this advice as she continued working. Could she be that bold? The very thought made her stomach flutter with nervousness. Yet the alternative, continuing in this limbo of unspoken feelings, seemed suddenly unbearable. That night she slept poorly, her dreams filled with images of Lucas riding away, never returning. She woke before dawn, a sense of resolve crystallizing within her. Today Lucas would return, and today she would speak her heart, whatever the consequences. The day passed with agonizing slowness. By mid-afternoon, Eliza had reorganized the pantry, mended every torn piece of clothing in the house, and was reduced to pacing the front porch, watching the road for signs of Lucas's return. When Tom rode in from checking the herd, he gave her a curious look. "Expecting someone, Miss Eliza?" She felt her cheeks flush. "Just worried about Mr. Quinn. The weather's turning." Tom glanced at the sky, where dark clouds were indeed gathering on the horizon. "Storm coming for sure. But the boss knows his way around. He'll be fine." He dismounted, leading his horse toward the barn. "Though if it makes you feel better, he said he'd be back before sundown. That's only a couple hours away." Eliza nodded, trying to hide her impatience. As Tom disappeared into the barn, she resumed her vigil, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the cooling air. The first fat drops of rain had just begun to fall when she spotted a rider approaching. Even at a distance, she would know Lucas's silhouette anywhere, tall and straight-backed in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the weather. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by nervousness. What would she say to him? How would he react? As Lucas rode into the yard, Eliza stepped off the porch into the light rain, unable to wait a moment longer. He saw her and reined in his horse, surprise evident in his expression. "Eliza, what are you doing out in the rain?" Instead of answering, she moved to his side as he dismounted. "Welcome home," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucas studied her face, rain droplets clinging to his hat brim. "Is everything all right? Did something happen while I was gone?" "No," she said, gathering her courage. "And yes," he frowned in confusion. "That's not much of an answer." "I realized something while you were away," Eliza continued, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "Something important." Lucas's expression grew guarded. "What's that?" "That I don't want to be just your housekeeper or your responsibility anymore." The words tumbled out in a rush. I want more than that, Lucas. I think you might want that too." His face went very still, only his eyes moving as they searched hers. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through her shawl, plastering her hair to her face, but Eliza barely noticed. "Eliza," he began, his voice rough, "you don't know what you're saying. You're grateful, that's all." "Confused about don't," she interrupted, a flash of anger giving her courage. "Don't tell me what I feel. I've had enough of men telling me what I should think or want or be." She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the raindrops on his eyelashes. "I know my own heart, Lucas Quinn. I've known it for weeks now. I love you." The words hung between them, undeniable in the rain-soaked air. Lucas looked stunned, as if she'd struck him rather than declared her love. "You can't," he said finally, so quietly she almost didn't hear him over the rain. "Why not?" Eliza challenged. "Because you rescued me." "Because you think I'm just grateful. Or because you're still punishing yourself for things you couldn't control." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," she pleaded. "Talk to me, Lucas. Tell me why you can't accept that someone might love you." For a long moment he said nothing, rain streaming down his face, mingling with what might have been tears. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "I couldn't save her," he said. "My sister. I promised our parents I'd protect her, and I failed. Then in the war, I lost men, good men under my command. Their blood on my hands." He shook his head. "And you, Eliza, you deserve better than a scarred, broken man who couldn't even protect his own sister." Eliza's heart ached for him, for the guilt he'd carried all these years. She reached up, gently touching the scar on his face. "You're not broken, Lucas. Wounded, yes, we all are in our own ways, but not broken." He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "Eliza," he whispered, and her name sounded like both a prayer and a plea. "I'm not asking you to be perfect," she said softly. "I'm just asking you to be brave enough to love me back." Something shifted in his eyes, then the barrier he'd maintained so carefully beginning to crumble. His hand tightened on hers. "I do," he admitted, the words seeming to be torn from him. "God help me, I do love you. Have almost from the beginning. But I was afraid. Afraid I'd fail you too." Eliza smiled through her own tears. "The only way you could fail me is by sending me away now." Lucas's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb gently wiping away the mixture of rain and tears on her cheek. "I couldn't do that," he said. "Not now. Not ever." And then he was kissing her, there in the pouring rain, his lips warm against hers, his arms drawing her close against his solid chest. Eliza melted into him, her heart soaring with a joy she'd never thought to experience. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "We should get out of this rain before we both catch our death," he murmured. Eliza laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Is that your way of asking me to come inside, Mr. Quinn?" A smile broke across his face, transforming it completely. "It's my way of asking you to come home, Miss O'Malley. For good." Hand in hand, they walked through the rain toward the house, toward their future together. The news of Lucas Quinn's engagement to Eliza O'Malley spread quickly through Silver Creek. Some nodded approvingly, having witnessed how the quiet rancher had rescued her from a terrible fate. Others whispered behind their hands, speculating about the true nature of their relationship. But Lucas and Eliza paid little attention to the gossip, too absorbed in their newfound happiness and plans for the future. Spring would be nice for a wedding, Eliza suggested one evening in late October as they sat before the fire, when the wildflowers are blooming in the meadow. Lucas, who had been reading beside her, looked up with a smile. "Spring it is, then, though I'd marry you tomorrow if you wanted," she laughed, setting aside her mending to take his hand. "Patience, Mr. Quinn. I want time to make my dress properly, and perhaps—" She hesitated, then continued, "Perhaps by spring we might have word of Sela's." Lucas's expression grew serious. He knew how much it meant to Eliza to reconcile with her brother despite everything. After Sela's had disappeared from Silver Creek the day after their confrontation, Lucas had quietly put out inquiries through his contacts in neighboring towns, hoping to locate him not for his own sake, but for Eliza's. "If he can be found, we'll find him," Lucas promised, squeezing her hand. "Though whether he deserves your forgiveness is another matter entirely." "He's still my brother," Eliza said softly, "the only family I have left." Lucas lifted her hand to his lips. "Not the only family, not anymore." The tender moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Holloway, who had been knitting in her rocking chair, rose with a sigh. "Who could that be at this hour?" She returned a moment later, her face grave. "Mr. Quinn, Sheriff Dawson is here. Says he needs to speak with you, and Miss Eliza too." Lucas and Eliza exchanged concerned glances before following Mrs. Holloway to the front door, where Sheriff Dawson, a stocky man with a graying mustache, stood hat in hand. "Evening, Quinn," the sheriff said, nodding respectfully. "Miss O'Malley, sorry to disturb you so late." "What brings you out here, Sheriff?" Lucas asked, gesturing for the man to come inside out of the cold. Dawson stepped in but declined to remove his coat. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." He turned to Eliza. "It's about your brother, miss." Eliza felt Lucas's hand come to rest supportively at the small of her back. "What about him?" she asked, her throat suddenly dry. "He's dead, Miss O'Malley. Found him this morning in an abandoned shack about 10 miles west of town. Looks like he'd been living there a while." The sheriff shook his head sadly. "Appears he froze to death during that cold snap last week. Had a bottle beside him, empty." Eliza swayed slightly, and Lucas's arm went around her waist, steadying her. "Are you certain it's him?" Lucas asked. The sheriff nodded. "No doubt." "Had his identification on him. And—" He hesitated, glancing at Eliza. "He had a letter. Addressed to you, miss. That's how we knew to come here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded, somewhat dirty piece of paper which he handed to Eliza. Her hands trembled as she took it. "I'm sorry for your loss," Dawson said. "The body's at the undertaker's in town, when you're ready to make arrangements." "I'll see to it," Lucas said firmly. "Thank you for bringing the news yourself, Sheriff." After Dawson had gone, Eliza stood motionless in the front hall, the unopened letter clutched in her hand. Lucas gently guided her back to the living room and into a chair. "Would you like me to leave you alone to read it?" he asked softly. Eliza shook her head. "No, please stay." She looked up at Mrs. Holloway, who hovered nearby with concern written across her face. "Both of you. You're my family now." With shaking fingers, she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was uneven, the words of a man clearly under the influence of alcohol, but still legible. "Lisa," she read aloud, "by the time you get this, I'll likely be gone. Can't seem to stop drinking and the money's run out. Jackson's men are looking for me and winter's coming on hard. I don't expect your forgiveness, don't deserve it, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Selling you was the worst thing I ever did, though it turned out better for you than me in the end. Quinn's a good man, better than I ever was. Hope he treats you right. Tell him I said so. Your brother Silas." Tears streamed down Eliza's face as she finished reading. Lucas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry, Eliza," he murmured. "I know you hope to reconcile with him." She nodded, unable to speak for a moment as grief washed over her. When she found her voice, it was steady despite her tears. "He was sorry at the end." "That matters to me." Mrs. Holloway approached with a handkerchief, which Eliza accepted gratefully. "He was still your brother, child. You have every right to mourn him." "We'll give him a proper burial," Lucas said. "Whatever you want." Eliza looked at him, love welling up through her grief. "Thank you, I think a simple service, just us. He wouldn't have wanted a crowd." Lucas nodded. "I'll ride into town tomorrow, make the arrangements." That night, as Lucas held her while she cried, Eliza felt the complex tangle of emotions that came with Silas's death, grief for the brother she'd once known and loved, anger at what he'd become, relief that he could no longer hurt her, and a strange kind of peace knowing that, in his final moments, he'd thought of her with remorse rather than resentment. "He was right about one thing," she whispered against Lucas's chest. "Being sold to you was the best thing that could have happened to me, though neither of us knew it then." Lucas's arms tightened around her. "I think I was the one who was purchased, Eliza. You bought me with your courage and your heart, made me live again when I'd just been existing." She lifted her head to look at him in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Promise me something, anything," he replied without hesitation. "Promise me we won't waste any more time. Life is too short and too precious." Lucas brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch infinitely tender. "I promise. No more wasting time." 2 days later, they buried Silas O'Malley in the small cemetery outside Silver Creek. The service was brief, attended only by Eliza, Lucas, Mrs. Holloway, Tom, and Miguel. Pastor Bennett from the town church spoke kind words about redemption and forgiveness, though he'd barely known Silas. As they stood by the freshly dug grave, Lucas noticed a stranger at the edge of the cemetery, a well-dressed man watching the proceedings with evident interest. When the service concluded, the man approached them. "Miss O'Malley," he inquired, removing his hat. "My name is Howard Blackburn. I'm an attorney from Helena. Might I have a word with you?" Lucas stepped protectively closer to Eliza. "This is hardly the time, Mr. Blackburn." The attorney nodded apologetically. "I understand, and I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I've been trying to locate Miss O'Malley for some months now. It's a matter of some importance regarding her parents' estate." Eliza looked up in surprise. "Our farm was lost to Silas's debts. There is no estate." "The farm, yes," Blackburn agreed. "But your mother's family holdings in Denver, those were never your brother's to lose." "My mother's." "I don't understand," Eliza said, confusion evident in her voice. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more comfortable," Blackburn suggested, glancing around the cemetery. "I have documents you should see." An hour later, they sat in the private dining room of Silver Creek's only hotel, examining the papers Blackburn had spread before them. Lucas watched Eliza's face as the attorney explained the situation. "Your mother, Ellen O'Malley, née Thornton, was the only daughter of James Thornton, a successful merchant in Denver. When he died 5 years ago, he left his entire estate to her, or to her children should she predecease him." Blackburn pointed to a section of the will. "We've been trying to locate you and your brother since your parents' passing, but the letters were returned, and our investigator lost track of you after the farm was sold." Eliza looked stunned. "My mother never spoke of any inheritance. I knew her family was from Denver, but she always said they'd disowned her when she married my father." "That may have been true during her father's life," Blackburn acknowledged, "but in death, it seems he sought to make amends. The estate includes a substantial sum of money, as well as property in Denver, a townhouse, and a small but profitable dry goods store. How substantial? Lucas asked, his practical mind assessing what this might mean for Eliza's future. Approximately $20,000, Blackburn replied, plus the properties, which are conservatively valued at another $15,000. Eliza gasped, and Lucas felt momentarily lightheaded. It was a fortune more than most people in the territory would see in a lifetime. But Silas never mentioned any of this, Eliza said, bewildered. Surely he would have used such an inheritance rather than selling me. Blackburn looked uncomfortable. I believe your brother was aware of the inheritance. He contacted our office about a year ago, claiming to be the sole heir. When we informed him that the will specified both O'Malley children were to inherit equally, he became uncooperative, refused to provide your whereabouts. Lucas felt a surge of anger. Silas had known about the money all along, money that could have saved their farm, saved Eliza from humiliation and fear. Instead, he tried to claim it all for himself, and when that failed, he turned to gambling and drinking, eventually selling his own sister rather than sharing the inheritance that was rightfully half hers. Mr. Blackburn, Eliza said after a long moment, what happens now? With Silas gone, does his portion come to me as well? The attorney nodded. As his only known relative, yes, the entire inheritance would pass to you. He hesitated, glancing at Lucas. I understand congratulations are in order. Your engagement has been mentioned in town. Thank you, Eliza replied. We're to be married in the spring. Then may I suggest, as your legal advisor, that before the wedding we establish a trust to protect your inheritance. Colorado law would normally transfer control of your assets to your husband upon marriage. Lucas stiffened slightly. That won't be necessary. Eliza's inheritance is hers, not mine. Blackburn looked skeptical. A noble sentiment, Mr. Quinn, but the law be damned, Lucas interrupted firmly. We'll sign whatever documents are needed to ensure the money remains Eliza's alone. Eliza reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it gratefully. Perhaps a compromise, she suggested. A trust that protects the principal but allows us both to manage the investments and income together. After all, we'll be partners in life. We should be partners in this as well. Lucas looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. As you wish. Blackburn seemed satisfied with this solution. Very wise, Miss O'Malley. I can draw up the necessary paperwork and return in a week's time for your signatures. In the meantime, here is a draft for $1,000 as an advance on your inheritance, to tide you over until the transfer is complete. He pushed a bank draft across the table. Eliza stared at it, then at Lucas, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. As they rode home that afternoon, Eliza was unusually quiet, her mind clearly working through the implications of her newfound wealth. Are you all right? Lucas asked as they crested the ridge overlooking the ranch. She nodded slowly. Just trying to make sense of it all. This morning I was an orphan burying her only brother. Tonight I'm an heiress with more money than I ever imagined. She looked at him, a hint of worry in her eyes. Does it change things between us? Lucas reined in his horse, prompting Eliza to do the same. Do you want it to? No, she said immediately, but I wonder if it changes how you see me. He studied her face in the golden light of late afternoon. The only thing that's changed is that now I don't have to worry about providing for you. You don't need me or my ranch anymore. Lucas Quinn, Eliza said, her voice suddenly fierce. If you think for one moment that I love you for your ranch or your protection, then you don't know me at all. I need you because you're you. Because you make me feel safe and cherished and whole. Money doesn't change that. The intensity of her declaration made Lucas smile. Good, Because I intend to keep you, Eliza O'Malley, inheritance or no. Her expression softened. And I intend to keep you, Lucas Quinn, and your ranch, and the life we're building together. She glanced toward the house in the valley below. Although perhaps now we can afford to fix that leaky roof before winter. Lucas laughed, the sound echoing across the open land. I believe we can manage that. The inheritance changed their plans in subtle ways. The wedding, still set for spring, would now include a trip to Denver afterward, where Eliza could see her mother's childhood home and meet with the managers of the store she now owned. Lucas insisted that the ranch operation remain separate from Eliza's inheritance. He had his pride. After all, but agreed that some improvements to the house and property made sense. I've been thinking, Eliza said one evening in early December as they sat by the fire, snow falling gently outside. About what to do with the money. Lucas looked up from the book he'd been reading. Oh, I'd like to establish a fund for women in difficult circumstances, women like I was. She set aside her sewing. Not charity exactly, more like opportunities. Loans for women who want to start businesses. Support for widows with children, that sort of thing. Pride swelled in Lucas's chest as he looked at the remarkable woman he would soon marry. I think that's a fine idea. There's something else. Eliza hesitated, then continued. I'd like to use some of the money to expand the ranch. Buy the Wilson property that adjoins our land to the east. You've always said it would make sense for grazing. Lucas frowned slightly. Eliza, I told you the ranch is my concern. Your inheritance should be for you. And are we not to be partners in everything? She challenged gently. You've given me a home, Lucas. Let me help build our future. He studied her determined expression and realized this was not a battle he would win, nor, perhaps, should he want to. All right, he conceded, but on one condition. What's that? That you let me build you a proper house. Something worthy of the woman you are. Eliza's eyes widened. But I love this house, and we'll keep it, Lucas assured her. For the hands, perhaps, or as a guest house. But I want to build you something that's ours from the foundation up, something we designed together. She considered this, then smiled. I'd like that, though nothing too grand. I don't need a mansion, Lucas, just a home with enough room for us and, he prompted when she trailed off. Eliza's cheeks colored slightly. And children, someday if you want them. Lucas set his book aside and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. I want everything with you, Eliza. Children, grandchildren, a life so full we can barely contain it. She leaned forward to kiss him, her lips soft and warm against his. Then that's what we'll build, together. Spring came early that year, painting the Montana landscape in vibrant greens and wildflowers of every hue. On a perfect May morning, with the scent of lilacs drifting on the breeze, Eliza O'Malley became Eliza Quinn in a simple ceremony in the meadow behind the ranch house. The guests were few: Mrs. Holloway, Tom, and Miguel, of course, Sheriff Dawson and his wife, the Wilsons, whose property they had purchased the month before, and a handful of other neighbors and friends from Silver Creek. Mr. Blackburn had traveled from Helena for the occasion, having become something of a friend during the process of settling Eliza's inheritance. Lucas waited beneath an arch of spring branches as Eliza approached, more beautiful than he had ever seen her in a gown of ivory silk that she had designed and sewn herself. Her hair was adorned with wildflowers, her cheeks flushed with happiness. As they spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days, Lucas marveled at the journey that had brought them here from that dark day at the trading post to this moment of perfect joy. I take you, Eliza O'Malley, to be my wife, he said, his voice steady and sure. Not as something purchased or owned, but as my equal, my partner, and the keeper of my heart. Tears shimmered in Eliza's eyes as she responded, "And I take you, Lucas Quinn, as my husband. Not as my rescuer or protector, but as the man I choose freely to love for all my days." When Pastor Bennett pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas drew Eliza into his arms for a kiss that sealed their union and promised a future brighter than either could have imagined a year before. The celebration afterward was joyful but simple, a feast prepared by Mrs. Holloway, music from Miguel's guitar, dancing under the open sky until the stars came out. As evening fell, Lucas and Eliza slipped away from the festivities, riding to the ridge overlooking the valley where their new home was already taking shape. "Mrs. Quinn," Lucas said, savoring the sound of her new name. "How does it feel?" Eliza smiled up at him, her face luminous in the twilight. "Like coming home, like the end of one journey and the beginning of another." He drew her close, breathing in the scent of wildflowers in her hair. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness. Never thought I deserved it." "We both deserve it," Eliza said firmly. "After everything, we've earned this joy." As they stood together, looking out over the land that was now truly theirs, Lucas reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. He had paid a price for Eliza that day in the trading post, $300 that had seemed a fortune at the time. But the true value of what he'd found was beyond measure. "I love you, Eliza Quinn," he whispered against her hair, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." She turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "I already know I won't. Some things are simply meant to be." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they rode back down to the ranch, to their home, their future, and the life they would build together. A life born from the darkest of circumstances, but blossoming now into something beautiful and enduring. 5 years later, Lucas stood on the porch of their home, watching as Eliza chased their 3-year-old daughter, Hannah, through the garden. The little girl's laughter rang out across the yard, a sound that never failed to fill his heart with joy. The Quinn Ranch had prospered beyond his wildest dreams. With the addition of the Wilson property and careful management of their combined resources, they now ran one of the most successful operations in the territory. The new house, a spacious but comfortable 2-story structure with wide porches and plenty of room for their growing family, stood as a testament to their shared vision. Eliza's Fund for Women in Need had become a formal foundation, helping dozens of women throughout Montana Territory establish businesses, educate their children, or simply survive difficult times. The dry goods store in Denver continued to thrive under the management she visited twice yearly, and she had recently begun discussing the possibility of opening a branch in Helena. As for Lucas himself, he had found a peace he'd never thought possible. The nightmares from the war had gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future. The guilt over his sister's fate had eased as he'd channeled his protective instincts into caring for his own family and ensuring the foundation that bore her name helped other young women avoid similar fates. "Papa," Hannah called, spotting him on the porch. "Come play." Lucas smiled and descended the steps, sweeping his daughter into his arms as she ran to him. "And what game are we playing today, little one?" "Horses," Hannah declared, her blue eyes so like his own sparkling with excitement. "I'm the wild Mustang and Mama's trying to catch me. Is that so?" Lucas glanced at Eliza, who approached more slowly, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach where their second child grew. "And is Mama having any luck?" "None at all," Eliza laughed, slightly breathless. "Our daughter is as wild and free as the Montana wind." "Just like her mother," Lucas observed with a smile, setting Hannah down. "Why don't you run and see if Mrs. Holloway has any cookies ready? I need to talk to Mama for a minute." The little girl needed no further encouragement, darting off toward the kitchen where Mrs. Holloway, now more grandmother than housekeeper to the child, would undoubtedly have treats waiting. Lucas turned to Eliza, drawing her into his arms. "You shouldn't be running in your condition." She rolled her eyes affectionately. "I'm pregnant, Lucas, not made of glass. The doctor said exercise is good for me." "Still," he murmured, placing a protective hand over her belly, "I worry about you both." "Both of us are perfectly fine," Eliza assured him, covering his hand with her own. "Though your son is quite the kicker. Takes after his father, I think." "Son, is it? Yesterday you were sure it was another girl," she shrugged, leaning into his embrace. "Mother's intuition changes daily. We'll find out soon enough." They stood together in the afternoon sunlight, the ranch spreading out before them, cattle grazing in the distance, horses in the corral, fields green with spring growth. From the kitchen came the sound of Hannah's laughter mingling with Mrs. Holloway's indulgent chuckles. "Do you ever think about it?" Lucas asked quietly. "That day in the trading post," Eliza considered the question. "Sometimes. Less often now." She looked up at him. "It's strange to think that something so terrible could lead to so much happiness." "I've often thought that I should thank your brother," Lucas admitted. "As awful as what he did was, it brought you to me." "We found each other," Eliza corrected gently, "and made this life together." She reached up to trace the scar on his face, a gesture that had become one of tenderness between them. "Every trail leads somewhere, Lucas. Ours led home." He bent to kiss her, still marveling after all this time at the softness of her lips, the perfect way she fit against him. "I love you, Eliza Quinn, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." She smiled against his lips. "And I love you, Lucas Quinn, the man who paid my price and won my heart." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long golden shadows across the land they had built together, Lucas Quinn reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from darkness into light, from isolation into love, from broken pieces into a whole more beautiful than either could have created alone. Some called it fate, some called it providence. Lucas simply called it the greatest blessing of his life, finding Eliza, loving her, building a future with her that extended far beyond what either of them had dared to dream. And in the end, wasn't that what the West was truly about? Not just survival or fortune-seeking, but the chance to create something new, something lasting. Something born of courage and hope and love. As Hannah came running back, cookie in hand and joy in her eyes, Lucas gathered his family close. Whatever the future held, another child, more challenges, greater opportunities, they would face it together. Just as they had faced everything since that fateful day when a desperate brother had unknowingly set in motion a love story that would echo through generations. For Lucas and Eliza Quinn, the true adventure had only just begun.